What did Disney receive in return for spending almost $250 million to rename Snow White? Family Guy made the entire endeavor into a farce. The most outrageous aspect of the film, the company, the casting, and Disney's entire reboot era was that they didn't even need to name Rachel Zegler for everyone to know exactly who they were discussing. The message was harsh and obvious. This wasn't just a passing joke. It was a full-on assault that struck hard because audiences are already tired of forced remakes and moral lectures passed off as entertainment. And in one crucial Family Guy scene, Rachel Zegler is unintentionally becoming the face of all that annoyance. Family Guy bluntly declares that Disney's empire is collapsing and that their obsession with reimagining classics is the main culprit as Peter Griffin strolls through Disneyland, looking perplexed, while a roller coaster bearing the name Disney stock plummets downward behind him. It gets worse. When Peter sees someone attractive on TV, he remarks, "Wow, that girl is hot." His friend promptly corrects him, saying, "Wow, that girl is hot. That's a guy. That other guy is handsome. That's a female. And that adorable cat is a dog." What is everything? This keeps happening until Peter eventually snaps and yells, "What is everything?" It's humorous and chaotic, but it also takes aim at the identity politics that many believe are controlling Hollywood's narrative style. The question, "What is everything?" has even turned into a meme, perfectly encapsulating the feelings that many viewers get when seeing contemporary reboots. Family Guy took that feeling and turned it into a precisely targeted punchline. They didn't hold back because they didn't need to. That's the luxury of a show that builds its reputation on being offensive, but for Disney, this wasn't just another roast. It was a wake-up call they couldn't ignore. Everything is being changed, renamed, redefined, and audiences are expected to accept it without question. Family Guy wasn't even the first animated series to follow Disney's new course, but South Park outperformed them and didn't merely make fun of Snow White, they took down the entire system that supported it. Kennedy, Kathleen Disney's choices made in the boardroom, they referred to the rehashed casting formulas as putting a chick in it and creating her lesbian playbook. Rachel Zegler was already in the crosshairs because, in the event that Family Guy fired shots, South Park dropped a nuclear bomb. Instead of merely mocking Disney, South Park reverse-engineered the formula and made fun of it line by line in their upcoming Pandaverse special, introducing a character that was obviously meant to be the episode plays like a fever dream in which Cartman is tormented by a multiverse in which every classic character has been replaced with a self-righteous corporate-approved version, while the entire thing is obviously satire. Kathleen Kennedy, the actual Disney executive behind the majority of the company's recent reboots, gave her a mystical object called the Panderstone and made it her mission to insert diverse women into every franchise, whether it made narrative sense or not. The viral moment occurred when South Park's portrayal of Kennedy threw her hands in the air and said, "Put a chick in it and make her gay." The message was too personal for Disney to dismiss. That one phrase quickly became a catchphrase for how many fans feel that Disney's most recent productions are forced to be repetitive and unoriginal, but the criticism wasn't limited to animation. This controversy has gotten so out of hand that the studio that produced some of the most beloved films is now being pulled by animation studio commentators, YouTube critics, and even its own original creators. Rachel Zegler is caught in the midst of a storm, and Snow White hasn't recovered from its backlash. George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, was caught in a viral clip criticizing Kennedy directly to her face during a panel. The audience laughed, but it was an uncomfortable laugh that felt a little too real. Disney is already eyeing its next billion-dollar gamble, a live-action remake of Tangled, and reportedly Rachel Zegler is attached to that project too, which is not going over well online. Tangled is set to become the most expensive Disney remake ever. We're talking over $500 million zero Allen with marketing, but after losing nearly $200 million zero on Snow White, there's panic setting in behind the scenes. Even loyal Disney fans are asking the obvious question, why would they risk this much again, especially with someone the internet already has pitchforks out for? The backlash against Tangled is happening before filming even begins, and it's not because Rachel Zegler lacks talent, it's because audiences feel like they're being sold a brand, not a story. When you throw $500 million behind that brand, the expectation isn't just for a good movie, it's for something bulletproof, something people want to root for right now. That's nowhere near where that energy is heading, and speaking of bad energy, that takes us straight to the moment when Rachel walked into an empty theater, posted a TikTok, and accidentally reminded everyone just how badly Snow White actually bombed. Normally, an actress visiting a theater wouldn't make headlines, but this wasn't just any screening, it was her own film. Her own promotion moment, with the seats nearly empty. She shared a brief Instagram story of herself carrying a bouquet of flowers as she entered the theater like it was a red carpet premiere. But behind her were only a few dispersed viewers. No buzz, no crowd, no excitement. What was supposed to be a cute viral moment quickly turned into a meme. And while it's easy to laugh at the awkwardness, it symbolized something deeper. The disconnect between Rachel and the fans who should have been there, and the film's intended audience. One major reason for that disconnect was her casting. As Snow White has always been described in the original story as having skin as white as snow, so when Disney chose a Latina actress for the part, the internet was a flurry of opinions. Critics contended that if a classic is to be remade, at least adhere to the essential details that characterize the work. Rachel reacted to the criticism with a TikTok, highlighting the value of contemporary representation, but pointing out that the issue wasn't only with the casting, but also with the way things were handled thereafter. Rachel went beyond simply defending her role to start attacking the original movie, calling it strange and antiquated, and even implying that the prince was fundamentally troublesome. This is where many fans drew the line. If you're playing an iconic role, at least respect the source material, and at least act as though you appreciate what came before you. However, the criticism didn't end there. It also became political. Rachel Zegler was one of several Hollywood celebrities who openly supported Palestine during the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict. She even signed a letter calling for a ceasefire, which by itself wouldn't have caused chaos, but her co-star Gal Gadot is infamously pro-Israel. Suddenly, a fictional fairy tale film turned into a real-life political battleground when Lebanon officially banned the film. Not because of Rachel, but because of Gal Gadot, according to distributors GDAU, which has long been on a boycott list in Lebanon, meaning that any film starring her gets blocked from being released there. Just when it seemed like the controversy couldn't get any more complicated, an old clip of Rachel reappeared in it, and she made controversial remarks on social media that needed damage control. She expressed regret, but as we are all aware, the internet never forgets and simply waits for the ideal opportunity to bring up the subject again at this time. No matter how beautiful the images were, or how many times Disney attempted to change the plot, the harm was done, and the last blow was delivered because Rachel Zegler was more popular for drama than for her acting skills. The appalling box office results. Snow White had a massive budget between $240 $270 million. It barely scraped $184 million. Zero. Globally, even Disney insiders were forced to admit it significantly underperformed expectations, but behind closed doors, producer Mark Platt's son Jonah Platt didn't hold back. He said what most executives were thinking, but wouldn't say publicly. Rachel's comments made things worse. Her interviews, her social media presence, her entire public persona, that's what tanked the vibe. That's what helped sink the movie. Now the question isn't whether Snow White failed, that's already established fact. The question is what Disney plans to do next, because animated shows are roasting them mercilessly, fans are walking away, and their most expensive remake yet still hasn't even started production at this point. Even Disney's most loyal defenders are starting to look the other way, but the roasts, they keep coming, and one of the darkest ones might have flown under the radar straight out. A Family Guy again. In one infamous Family Guy episode titled Quagmire's Dad, the show introduced a transgender character named Ida. While the intent might have been progressive for its time, the execution was anything but the most notorious moment. Brian the dog vomiting repeatedly after learning he'd slept with Ida. The scene sparked outrage across the internet, yet Family Guy never backed down. They've never claimed to be fair, but they've always been fearless. And if they're already going that hard on Disney's casting choices, identity politics, and box office failures, there's no reason to think they're finished, which brings us to the one cartoon empire that hasn't fully entered the fray yet, but might be next: The Simpsons. For more than 30 years, The Simpsons have expertly parroted pop culture, politics, and the media. More recently, they have been taking aim at their Disney overlords. Keep in mind that Disney now owns them, but that business arrangement hasn't stopped them from making bolder jokes about their parent company. They have already roasted Marvel fatigue. Given the overabundance of Star Wars and the never-ending stream of remakes, it appears that Snow White will soon be directly targeted by them.